Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to my channel, and I'm going to continue my series on great Seattle bands you may not have heard of. And they don't come much more legendary than Seattle's the Blackouts. And I came across them because I actually used to work at Tower Records with Bill Rieflin, and we became friends. And he'd been in a couple of early Seattle punk bands like the Snots and the Telepaths, and I'd seen them, and they were incredible. And it was great to see stuff like that back in '77 and '78. And when I was working with Bill Rieflin, he said, "Oh yeah, I got this new band I'm putting together, the Blackouts." And so I actually went to their first show in the University District here at the Ethnic Cultural Center in 1979, and was really wowed. Really interesting sound to the band. There's some new wave elements, but there's also some progressive elements, and then they just had their own sound, very distinctive because of the components involved. Bill Rieflin was an amazing drummer even then, and Eric Werner became a very distinctive vocalist, even though he was very reticent to be the vocalist when they started. But the band started out as Bill Rieflin on drums, Roland Barker on keyboards and electric sax, Michael Davidson on bass, and Eric Werner on guitar. And Michael Davidson would end up in another Seattle band called Life in General, and was a completely respected bass player in town. In fact, I tried to get him to join one of my bands at one point, and a missed opportunity just because of crossed wires. But they came out, and they were a sensation right away. Their shows were always packed. Everybody was talking about them. They put out their first 7-inch in 1979 called Make No Mistake. By 1980, they had a 12-inch out called Men in Motion. And by 1981, they actually came out with a single in the UK on Situation 2, a subsidiary of 4AD, called Exchange of Goods. And then they wound up with a 12-inch EP on Al Jorgensen's label called Lost Souls Club, and that's the motherlode, the band at their height and fully developed. And halfway through their incarnation, actually Michael Davidson left and was replaced by Ian Barker on bass, and it gave him a much darker sound. And so the difference between Make No Mistake and Men in Motion, which have some kind of new wave elements, by the time they get to Exchange of Goods and Lost Souls Club, they're pretty dark. There's elements of Birthday Party in there, and Bill Rieflin's incredible drums right up front, and Eric Werner just really turned into a mesmerizing frontman. I saw one show they did in 1982, and I took acid, and I thought I was being sucked into hell. U-Men opened the show, and the Blackouts were just incredible, covered themselves with pig's blood. And that was before a lot of bands were doing that sort of thing. And right after that, they left Seattle, moved to Boston for a while. And then in 1984, they moved to San Francisco for a while, and they eventually hooked up with Al Jorgensen and became Ministry. And so pretty much the entire Blackouts band, Bill Rieflin, Ian Barker, and Roland Barker, all became members of Ministry and played with Ministry for several years. And Bill Rieflin would go on to play with Ministry, KFDM, Revolting Cocks, the Swans. He was involved in a Soft Boys reunion. And then he ended up putting out a couple of solo LPs, and then found himself playing with King Crimson the last several years before he finally passed of cancer about 3 or 4 years ago. And there's also an incredible trio record with Bill Rieflin on drums, Robert Fripp on guitar, and Trey Gunn on bass. I'll probably do a separate video on that. But the Blackouts were amazing, and they will always be a Seattle legend. There wasn't anyone like them. And it's really kind of shocking, other than the final EP, Lost Souls Club. One, that they never got an album out, and two, that they didn't get signed to a major label because they had everything going for them. And they were a fully realized band thanks to Bill Rieflin's vision and the addition of the electric sax and the minimalist keyboards, and then Eric Werner's dissonant no-wave guitar work. Just made them a force to be reckoned with, and their shows were amazing. And so there's probably a lot of people out there that are familiar with Ministry and Al Jorgensen. A lot of those people might not be familiar with the Blackouts, but they were definitely one of the great bands, and certainly a total legend here in Seattle. If you haven't heard them, check them out. I'll post a bunch of stuff below. Thankfully, several years back, a complete compilation called History in Verse was released, and it gathered all their material together, including some unreleased material. And it is really wonderful. They were definitely one of a kind, and I'm happy to say they were friends of mine, and I got to see them a whole ton of times, and still have their records and love them. And as I pointed out, in their final incarnation, and that last 7 inch and that last 12 inch, they were as good as anybody in the world. And so the Blackouts, great Seattle band. If you haven't heard them, check them out. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching. I Hate Rock Music.